Today we are going to go through the history of Iran, from the beginning all the way up to modern day. Let's start this journey by meeting the first people who will be the predecessors of the modern Iranians. They are the ancestors of the people that lived around the Caspian Sea, specifically in what is now northern Iran. These people spoke a language called Alkan, which is related to the modern Iranian languages. Their history can be traced back to at least the 9th century BC. They were nomadic goat herders, but as time went on, they became more settled and started to farm. Around the 6th century BC, they built cities like Ray and Tabriz, and that's where they stayed put for quite some time. Meanwhile, in southern Iran, there was another group of people living in the lowlands, near the Persian Gulf. They were called the Persians, and they had been there since at least the 11th century BC. You see, it's really quite remarkable how much Iran has changed over time. Like, here it is today, but look at this map from 2,000 years ago. There's no recognizable shape of Iran here. It's just a bunch of different groups throughout the Middle East. Anyway, the Persians were also nomadic at first, but they eventually became farmers too and built cities like Persepolis and Persepolis. Now, here's where things get interesting. In the 6th century BC, a king named Cyrus the Great united the Medes and the Persians and created the Achaemenid Empire. This empire stretched from Central Asia all the way to the Mediterranean Sea and from Turkey down to Pakistan. But after Alexander the Great came along and conquered the area in the 4th century BC, the empire fell apart. After Alexander's death, Iran came under the control of various Greek and Roman empires. But then in the 3rd century AD, a new power arose in the region, the Parthian Empire. The Parthians were a nomadic people who lived on the edge of the empire. As I mentioned in my video about Genghis Khan, nomads often have a military advantage, because they're used to horses and archery and stuff like that, and the Parthians were no exception. They even created a special type of cavalry that could shoot arrows while riding their horses. That was crazy back then, but anyway, the Parthians ruled over Iran for a long time until the 3rd century AD. When another nomadic people called the Sassanids took over, they kept many of the old traditions of the Parthians, but they also brought in a lot of their own. For example, they adopted Zoroastrianism as the state religion, which is a dualist religion that was founded in Iran around the 6th century BC. Dualism is a kind of belief system that says that there are two gods, or principles that are opposed to each other, and in Zoroastrianism, those are called Ahura Mazda and Angra Mainyu. Ahura Mazda is the god of good and light, while Angra Mainyu is the god of evil and darkness. They're constantly fighting each other to control the world, but in the end, good will triumph over evil. Zoroastrianism had a big influence on other religions, especially Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Some people even believe that Zoroaster himself was a prophet of God, like how Moses or Jesus was. Anyway, the Sassanian Empire lasted until the 7th century AD, when it was conquered by Arab Muslims. Here's what happened. Up until the 7th century, Iran had been mostly a peaceful place. There weren't really any big conflicts between the different groups. Everyone just kind of got along. But then Islam showed up, and everything changed. You see, Islam is a very exclusive religion. It doesn't really accept other beliefs or cultures. It wants everyone to convert so they can all be one big happy family under the one true God. And this caused a lot of tension in Iran, because the people there had been following Zoroastrianism for centuries, and they weren't just going to give that up for some new-fangled religion. The Arabs invaded Iran twice, once in 637 and again in 641. Both times they were led by a man named Khalid ibn al-Walid. He was known as the Sword of Allah because he was a brilliant military leader who knew how to take advantage of his enemies' weaknesses For example, he would send out small groups of fast-moving cavalry to harass his opponents, and then he would follow up with his main force to finish them off. It was very effective. After the Arab armies had conquered Iran, they began to change the country. They built mosques and schools and converted the people to Islam. They also introduced Arabic as the official language. Although Persian remained the most common language spoken by the people, but even though the Arabs were able to conquer Iran, they couldn't really control it. There was a lot of resistance from the Iranian people, and it wasn't until the 10th century that the Arabs were finally able to put it down. In the meantime, Iran had become part of the Abbasid Caliphate. But, in the 9th century, a new caliphate emerged, the Buyid dynasty. They were a Persian family that came to power in Baghdad, and they ruled over Iran for about 2 centuries. The Buyids were Shiite Muslims, which means that they believed that Ali, the cousin and son-in-law of Muhammad, should have been the first caliph after him. They were opposed by the Sunni Muslims, who believed that Abu Bakr should have been the first caliph instead. The Sunnis were in power in Baghdad, so the Buyids were kind of like the rebels fighting against the government. The Buyids built a lot of infrastructure in Iran, like roads and bridges and public buildings. They also encouraged trade and industry and helped to make cities more livable. But their dynasty eventually collapsed in the 11th century, was conquered by the Seljuk Turks. The Seljuks were a nomadic people from Central Asia who had converted to Islam. They were great horsemen and warriors, and they quickly took control of Iran. They were also Sunni Muslims, so they reversed the Buyid policy of favoring Shia. But even though the Seljuks ruled over Iran, they didn't really control it. There was still a lot of resistance from the local people, and it was unearned until the 12th century that the Mongols arrived that things really changed. Genghis Khan and his successors conquered Iran in the 13th century and made it part of the Mongol Empire. They were tolerant of other religions and they encouraged trade and cultural exchange, but they were also ruthless when it came to putting down rebellions. After the Mongols, Iran came under the control of various Turkish dynasties, but none of them were able to hold on to power for very long. In the 16th century, a new dynasty emerged. They were Shiite Muslims, and they built a strong centralized state in Iran. They also created a new capital city called Isfahan, which became one of the most beautiful cities in the world. But the good times didn't last forever. In the 18th century, Iran was hit by a series of natural disasters, including earthquakes, droughts, and floods. This caused a lot of economic and social problems and made the country more vulnerable to outside threats. In the early 19th century, Russia, Britain, and other European powers started to take an interest in Iran. They wanted to control its trade routes and its oil fields, and this caused a lot of instability in the country. Eventually, in 1905, a revolution broke out that led to the establishment of a new government in Iran. In the 20th century, Iran experienced a lot of changes. In 1925, the Shah Reza Khan came to power and he turned Iran into a modern nation-state. He built schools and hospitals and roads, and he encouraged industrialization and urbanization, but he was also a dictator who cracked down on any opposition. After World War II, Iran became a constitutional monarchy. The Shah's son, Mohammad Pahlavi, came to power in 1941, but he was overthrown in the Iranian Revolution of 1979. The revolution was led by Ayatollah Khomeini, who was a religious leader and politician. He established a new government based on Islamic law and made Iran an Islamic republic. Since then, Iran has become a major player in the Middle East. It is a leader of the resistance against Israel, and it is also a rival of the United States. In recent years, Iran has experienced a lot of internal conflict and instability. There have been protests and riots and assassinations, But, despite all these problems, Iran remains a vibrant and important country. And that's the history of Iran from the beginning all the way until today. If you liked this video, please leave a comment below and subscribe for more content. Thanks for watching.